Hello everyone, welcome to the Automation on ChronoScan webinar, Making Your Folders Hot. And today we are going to talk about how to automate the processing of our jobs inside ChronoScan. When we are talking about automation on ChronoScan, we are talking about hot folders. We set up our jobs, make sure they are running the best as possible, and then we set up a hot folder to run those jobs automatically for us. But we are talking machine reading here, and we are going to get, more often than not, reading errors. But worry not, because ChronoScan provides a very wide range of tools to deal with those errors and circumvent them. We have several types of input filters, we have several types of input validation, we can do image processing, we can do direct PDF text import on our PDF documents, and many more. I'm not going to talk about all of them here because we are not going to use them, and that's not the point of this webinar. But don't worry, because ChronoScan comes with a full suite of features to circumvent all of the faults in the OCR engines that exist out there. So today we are going to learn how to create, how to run, and how to manage our hot folders with all of the obstacles that we have along the way. That said, let's jump into ChronoScan. Here on ChronoScan, you can see I have 3 batches, and the 3 of them are all already empty because that's the hot folder configuration I set. Let's take a look at the jobs I have here. You can see I only have 3 jobs here, and those are the jobs I had set up for the 3 different hot folders configuration I had, as you can see here on the hot folder tab. So let's take a look at each of those and what settings I did use for each of them. We click on the desired hot folder configuration, and then we click on edit here. As you can see here, we can set it as active as soon as we save it. We can name it, very important step. Here we select the job, and only the jobs on our ChronoScan installation are going to show up here. So before we create a hot folder, we must create a job first and set it up, make sure everything is okay, and then we can finally add our hot folder configuration here. And that's one of the demonstrations I'm going to do today for you. We can select the import module here, we can do images or PDF. And in the case of using a scanner, we are going to set the scan to scan to a certain folder on our machine, and then we will have the hot folder configuration looking into that folder for new files. Those can be PDF or JPEGs or even TIFF images. Here I have JPEGs, although I think they are TIFF, yeah. And now let's take a look at the import setup here. That's a very important step, because on here we are going to tell ChronoScan where our files are going to be found at. Also, some other settings that have to do with the extension. We also have some other options here. If we have a different configuration for our scan, we can set this up here, so we can import the documents on the correct order, especially when we have multi-image documents. We want everything on the correct order. And that last option here is also very, very important. Make sure you either have a imported or done or move to another completely different folder, just to make sure ChronoScan don't end up in an endless loop importing the same files over and over again. That's a very important one. And then we have settings for JPEGs and PDFs, but since those are TIFF, I will just leave it as it is. And then we can name our batches. You can either create a new batch with a generic name. That might be helpful depending on your case. We can use different folders for our different files and then create new batches for each different folder. And don't forget the first level only. So it's not going to do, ChronoScan is not going to do subfolders. We can use the default name, that's the same setting as the new batch. And then we can also create a new batch, name it. I have here the name HotFolder output batch. I just used it, but on the exported documents I have, I didn't use that batch name here. But if you want everything on the same batch, that's how you do it. And down here, we have some timing options and the minimum file. Let's say your scanner works at a certain rate and then you want to match this. So ChronoScan have some time, or your scanner have some time to scan a couple files or finish the entire batch of files. So ChronoScan can start processing, importing, and then exporting our documents. We can also have a delay here, and that delay will make ChronoScan wait a little bit after the minimum number of files is reached to start actually working on the document. Here I have set it to 10 because I don't have, I have all the files already on the folders. So I just make it as small as possible, but not too small, so I can take a look at how things happen. We also have a very nice feature here. We can pause if an import error occurs, because otherwise we are waiting for nothing. And we can also send an email to the administrator, and that administrator email, you can set it up here on the administration tab. You go on the program settings, and then here on the administrator email, you can set up your email, and then ChronoScan will email you if an error occurs, and you can even test using this button right here. Now, one of the other very important settings is the processing options. We click here and we can select on input finish, on process finish, on export begin, and on export finish. What I have here on input, I don't have anything, but if you need something extra to happen before, at the time of input, you select this one here. Then on input finish, ChronoScan can also do Visual Basic scripting, and you want to make sure you have process new elements selected here. And now on process, and on process will only happen when you have process new elements selected. So you can have a hot folder only to import documents, but if you want to take full advantage of the hot folders, you want to process your new elements. And then you can select on the on process what actions are going to happen. Here I have a lot of options. I might not need all of them. You just select everything you need and then leave the others untouched. And then on process finish, you can either export the batch, just leave it as it is. You can even have a beep. You can send an email. That's the same administrator email, and you can shut down your computer. I just want to export the batch, and that will export using the export options I have set while I was setting up our job. On export begin, we can again run Visual Basic scripting, and on export finish, I selected to delete exported documents, and that's why my batches were all empty. And we can even delete the batch if it is open, if it is empty. And that's basically all the settings we have. The only different thing I have here on the simple table, let's go to the HotFolders, simple table. Let's take a look at it. The only different thing is I have read grid control here since I have tables. The rest is basically the same. But we are going to take a look at how to do all of that in a little bit. So let's start setting things up here. The first step before importing things and setting things up, let's take a look at the documents we are going to import today. We have those invoices here, and what I want to capture is the invoice number, the invoice date. I want to capture the NIF number of the customer, and then those invoice totals here. So, and I also want to capture that barcode here. That's very important as well. Okay, so let's go into ChronoScan and run the job wizard. I will click on the new batch button and then click on the job wizard button right here. Let's call this one Euskatel job and then click on next. We are going to use IntelliTag and we are going to use barcode reading, but the IntelliTag I will only enable it later, and the barcode reading I will enable it right now. I will click on next here. We have single image documents, so I'll just leave it as it is. Click here and then click on next. We have invoice fields. We already have the barcode reading here. We are not going to have the supplier. We don't need order number. The rest is okay. And now I will add one last one. That's going to be called NIF. Customer NIF. There we go. I will now click on next. Next again, and make sure everything is as I want. That's perfect. Now I'll click on finish and let's create our first batch. I will call it setup batch for the HotFolder. HotFolder setup batch. I will click on create batch, and now we are ready to import our documents. Since we only have two, I will only import those two. I will set the resolution to 300, although that's not really necessary unless you are having some problems with your OCR reading. I don't have problems with those documents, but if you do, just try setting the resolution to higher. I will apply to the next file and then click OK. And now ChronoScan will import the two files, the two PDF files for me. Now, you can see the barcode is being read already. That's perfect. And since we only have one barcode, I'm not going to even mess around with it. We'll just leave it as it is. Now, I want that field to be a little bit higher here. So just click on it and move it up. Just under the barcode reading. That's perfect. Now let's start setting up our IntelliTags. Customer NIF. That's the text, so I just click on the IntelliTag, click on the field, and I'll select the text I want for the IntelliTag. That's the one. I want to assign to a list. That's going to be customer NIF, and then click OK. Now I want to look for that text. If you are not very sure on how to use IntelliTags, we have several videos about it. Just take a look at our YouTube page. I want to look for the nearest code. That's perfect, and it doesn't need to be type specific. I will click on OK. We want to activate the IntelliTag. I will click yes, and let's see. It is perfectly captured. That's perfect. Now let's take a look at everything else. The invoice number. I believe we already have a list for invoice number set up on our ChronoScan installation. Those lists are global. Let's take a look here. We click on the field and then on that button, little button here, and then field properties. That will open the properties window. But you can also move it here and have another window down here for anything you want. Let's say the grid view. Let's leave it down here. And let's go back to the properties, and we are going to have the properties for everything we click on ChronoScan on this window all the time. So let's click here on the invoice number. The properties for the invoice number field are here. I will go down on the IntelliTag search, and on the IntelliTag list, let's take a look if I have invoice number already. And as I thought from previous configurations, I already have it here. That is because the IntelliTag lists are global for the entire ChronoScan setup. So you are always going to have your lists for everything. And now let's add the IntelliTag list is assigned. Now let's add that text to the IntelliTag list. If we take a look at it here, we can see we don't have that kind of text assigned on our list. So we just click OK here, and then IntelliTag, click on the field and select the text. When we want the nearest code, that's perfect. We don't need it type specific, and then I'll click OK. Let's see how it goes. It goes perfectly. That's awesome. Now the date, we'll do the same thing. Click here, go on the properties, go down on the IntelliTag search, select the correct list. To avoid doing all of those extra steps, we could just enable the IntelliTag search while we were setting up the job. But I like to do everything manually, so I know in which list everything is. So that's why I set everything up manually. Now let's add the date here. I'll click here on the field, IntelliTag, and then select the text. Perfect. I want the nearest date. That's perfect. No type specific, and then click OK. Let's see how the date goes. It's capturing the perfect date, exactly the date that we wanted. Now let's go for the other values here. And you can see the confidence of the OCR engine is not that high, but if we take a look, it is capturing the correct date. So we don't have to worry about it. Probably even if we were using ChronoScan, OCR, or Tesseract, or Cuneiform, we would not have problems because those documents are very good. Now let's go down here and see ChronoScan can read some of that text, all of it actually, so that's perfect for us. We have enough contrast and enough resolution, so ChronoScan is reading it perfectly. Let's go to the net total again. We have to assign each of those fields to a already created list, because otherwise, if I try to assign the IntelliTag before doing that, ChronoScan, I will either have to create a new list, a new IntelliTag list, or just go at the end of the day, go here on the IntelliTag list and select the correct list. That's net total. That's the list for the net total. And let's do this for all of our other fields. We have text total. Let's assign it to the correct IntelliTag list. And let me tell you, if you were running a clean installation of ChronoScan, you would not have those IntelliTag lists. I have them because I already set some IntelliTag lists for other jobs and other videos and webinars and tutorials. So that's why I already have those lists here. And again, to avoid that extra step, you just have to enable IntelliTag from the beginning. And then you would be able to select which list would be with each field. And some of them would be already selected. You just would have to add the desired tag for each of the fields. Now the invoice total. Let's go to the IntelliTag list, make sure that's invoice total, perfect. Let's go to the IntelliTag list. Let's add invoice total here. And that's alphabetically ordered, so no troubles here. Now let's add the tags for those fields. We have net total, that's that text right here. IntelliTag, click the field and then select the text, the nearest valid amount. We don't need to have it as type specific. Let's click OK and see how it goes. It is capturing the correct text. That's perfect. Now let's use the text total. The IntelliTag is already assigned and you can see it by those icons here. Let's just select the field, IntelliTag, and now select the tag we want. Nearest valid amount, we don't need to make it type specific again, and then click OK. And that's it. Enough of time spent on capturing data, because that webinar is all about HotFolders. Now that we have everything set up, let's test. our settings. I will select everything on the grid view here and reset the document. So most of the information will be erased. And now I will process everything using those settings here. We don't need grid control. I will just click OK. Let's see how the data is captured, if we have any errors. We don't. So we are ready to set up our hot folder. As we can see here, we have the files on that folder right here, and we're going to take a look at that a little bit later. Let's go to the Tasks and Hot Folder tab right here, and let's add a configuration. We are going to name it Euskaltel Invoices Hot Folder. We are going to select the Euskaltel job. That's the job we just set up right there. And there's one last thing, but I will talk about it after we set up the hot folder. We have PDF files, as you can see. So you're going to use the import PDF. And now let's set up the PDF import module. That's the directory where we are going to get our files from. I will just go to the Windows Explorer, copy the folder, the path actually, and then paste the path here. That's perfect. We have PDF files. We don't need those settings. We don't need to set those up because at the job wizard setup, we already did it. We will leave everything as is. I will change the resolution to 300 just to make sure, although it's not really necessary. And now a very important setting again. We are going to move the files to the imported folder after they are imported, meaning that on this folder right here, the files will be moved to a new folder called imported after ChronoScan works on them. I'll just click finish here. So the setup for this part is already done. I will send to a batch called Euskaltel Invoices Hot Folder. There we go. Send always to that batch. We also have those options. I already talked about them. And since we have so little documents, I'll just set the delay time to 5 seconds. Now to what really matters, the processing options. Let's click here. Make sure on input finish, we have process new elements selected. Now on process, let's do some image OCR. Let's do OCR triggers, type detection, read fields, and execute IntelliTag. And that's pretty much all we need. We could auto crop and descale, but I think that won't be necessary. On process finish, we want to export the batch. And on export finish, we want to delete the exported documents. That's very important to select because we can set up, and I will show you how it works. I will just click OK and save. Let's say on the job, we have set up some validation rules. Let's say that here we have the validation rule for the invoice total. And by export time, let's go here to the export batch. That's also what I wanted to show you. Let's select the PDF with text, searchable text here. Let's click on the options right here. And on the source filters, if we set this to doc status validated, ChronoScan will only export the validated documents, meaning that if you have a document here where the invoice total has an error, ChronoScan will not export those documents. And since we selected the delete exported documents, after we export and run the hot folder, only the documents with errors will remain on the batch, and then we can go back into ChronoScan, fix only those documents, and then export again manually now. So we could set up some validation rules for the invoice number, the customer NIF, that's a standard identification. So we could set up something like a validation rule. Let's do this here. Let's go to the field properties, and on input validation. Let's click on the options right here and use regular expression option. Now let's write our regular expression. There should be A to Z. So it's a letter once. So we leave it as it is. And then we want 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 digits. So let's do this one here, D, and then let's use those brackets here, the curly brackets, 9 times, and that's it. Now we click OK. You can see the validation is correct. Let's see if we remove 1, you can see it is not right. It does not meet the regular expression, and we can even set up a row here, test string, no, but the help string is not valid NIF number. There we go. And now when it's wrong, that text will show up here. If we have another user going through the documents, you can have those help texts when it's not the person that set up the job. Now let's just reprocess this guy here. So the number goes back to where it was. Let me reset it actually. And now reprocess. And you see that everything is good. But if we had some trouble, ChronoScan would not export those files and leave them at the batch. So we could go back to them later and then do the correct thing. Now let's set up some export options. You set those up before setting the hot folder that we have here, or we can do afterwards. Either way, since we actually activated it, but since we don't have the hot folder and notifications processes running, that hot folder will not run. Usually we would just deselect the active configuration here to make sure that so we could take a look at everything and make sure all the settings we want are correct. So let's go back here, make sure we have that batch opened, and then click on export batch. Here, every setting we set up here is going to be used for the hot folder. So we have a PDF text conversion. I might not want that. Let's use a nuance PDF with some compression to the file system. I just click on add. We just want to export the validated documents. That's perfect. Now let's set some things here. We don't want metadata. Well, let's just leave it as it is. And click OK. And now let's set the options for the file destination. That's the file system. Again, we only want to export validated ones. And the output directory, we can use the same directory as the folders. There we go. And we can set up a new folder called output. And we can use as the file name. Let's remove everything. And now use a user field. Let's use the barcode reading. You can see here a preview for the file names. So we are going to use only the barcode reading, but we could use more complex things. The extension is like that. And then we click OK. And those settings are going to be the ones that our hot folder is going to use. So if we wanted to do an export to another destination or using another module, let's say a XML or ODBC, we would just add them. And then now that we have everything set, we are ready to come here to the tasks and hot folders. Click here. Let's edit it. Make sure again that everything is good. Click on save. And then we click here on activate. Now, we don't have the hot folder and notifications running on our system. But when we click here, we can start ChronoScan on the correct configuration. Usually that would only start your ChronoScan on the default one for you. But since I have more configurations, it allows me to switch configurations. I will just cancel and cancel. Now let's make sure our files are not being used and I don't have the files opened anywhere here. We have here the folder with the 2 files. So let's give it a go and see how it goes. I will click on Start, select my configuration here. And now I will open this, the notifications and the console. Those are the 2 icons. It found 2 files and now it is working on those files. You can see we already have the files moved to the imported folder. Now we just have to wait for ChronoScan to process everything. It's already exporting, as we can see here on the console. And now it is done. It was very fast because I didn't want to take too much time. But now we can see here, we have the output and we have our 2 files here. And now since we didn't have any errors, when we go here, let's refresh, delete all. There you go. And close that service as well. I don't need it, but usually you would just leave it running. There we go. And when we opened, we actually don't have the batch. Let's refresh here and you can see we have several ones. Those were some things from another setup. Just don't mind those. You can see here we have, that's the one we want, the Euskatel invoices hot folder. That's the batch we set up on our hot folder configuration. When I open it, you can see it is empty. So no documents had errors in them. And if you want to make sure that you don't have extra batches, you can just use that option here. Let's select the correct one. You can use the delete batch. So if you cleaned all the exported documents and they all should be validated, and then if the batch is empty and every document was correctly captured and then exported, it will delete the batch. That's another option to select. And that's it. That's basically how you set up your hot folder. Now let's just review all of our steps real quick here before we finish the webinar. We first must have our job set up. So we open a new job and import a few sample documents, and then we have to set up everything the way we want. And when we have everything the way we want, especially the capture options and then the export options, we go to the hot folder and then we set up a new hot folder, clicking on the add button. We select all of the options, the import folder, the correct import module, the correct job, and then we set up also our output folder here. If we want a imported folder here, we also can set up the batch to use and many other things. And then we must not forget to select the process new elements here, unless you just want to import, but that's not using is not even using half of the potential of hot folders. And then export a batch. We can use some other options, delete exported documents, and then delete the batch if all the documents were exported and captured successfully. And that's it. And if you run hot folders regularly, you just want to select those 2 options, start hot folder and the notifications with Windows. And with more advanced configuration, you can even set up the notifications for the hot folders. You saw some notifications popping up here on the bottom right of the screen. You can set them to even show up on another machine. You can set up the administrator email to receive an email when everything is done. You can set up a beep. You can turn off your machine. So you have many options and even more as time goes by. So please don't forget to leave your comments and questions if you have on the comments on this video. And also you can email us, you can talk with us on Twitter, on Facebook. Don't forget, if you can, to subscribe to our YouTube page. Otherwise, you can just go to our blog page and visit it regularly for new videos. And you can also find us on LinkedIn. So we are very easy to find and we are very within reach. So that's it, guys. I hope you liked it, and I will see you on the next webinar. Bye bye.